Clark out for the remainder of the 2025 season, something we all think we knew was coming after what Stephanie White said earlier today. We couldn't be too sure until we see it for ourselves. And with this announcement from the GOAT's mouth herself, Caitlin Clark won't be returning this season, nor if the Indiana Fever make
the WNBA and the league's demise now that Caitlin Clark is no longer going to play this season. The WNBA and the Indiana Fever, Stephanie White, Amber Cox, all the way up and including, let's just keep it real, Kathy Engelbert, Adam Silver.
The WNBA is standing on the edge of collapse, and the breaking point came today when it was confirmed that Caitlin Clark, the one player single-handedly carrying the league's momentum, will not return this season. And this isn't just about one injury or one team. It's about the Indiana Fever. It's about Stephanie White, Amber Cox, Kathy Engelbert, even Adam Silver, all the executives and officials who allowed this disaster to unfold. Because what started as a simple quad strain in May spiraled into groin issues through June and July, then ended with a brutal bone bruise in August, and piece by piece her body gave out while referees swallowed their whistles, rivals targeted her relentlessly, and league leadership turned a blind eye. And now fans are furious, demanding answers, refunds, and even boycotts, because the WNBA just lost its brightest star, and with her, it may have lost the very future of the league. From the moment Caitlin Clark stepped onto a WNBA court, she was more than just a rookie. She was the spark that reignited women's basketball, the name on every billboard, the face on every ticket, the reason arenas from New York to Las Vegas were suddenly sold out. And yet, despite everything she brought to the league, she was left unprotected. Targeted night after night by defenders who weren't just playing tough basketball, but deliberately roughing her up, grabbing her jersey, knocking her off screens, and daring officials to call a foul that almost never came. And fans saw it all unfold in real time, possession after possession, while the referees turned their heads, swallowed their whistles, and created an environment where the league's most valuable player was treated like a disposable rookie. A decision that didn't just end her season, but may have permanently damaged the credibility of the WNBA itself. What fans can't understand, and what continues to fuel outrage, is how a player who instantly became the face of the WNBA could be battered game after game without intervention, because this wasn't one bad night or a single overly aggressive team. It was a pattern that stretched across the entire league, with Clark shoved into help defense, hammered off curls, grabbed before the ball even touched her hands. And every time the referees had a chance to protect her, they chose silence. And the result was not only unfair competition, but a dangerous environment where her body absorbed hit after hit until it inevitably broke down. And what makes it worse is that this wasn't hidden from the public. Everyone saw it on national broadcasts, fans screamed about it on social media, analysts questioned it on live television, and even the Washington Post documented the reckless targeting. Yet the league's leadership and commissioner, Kathy Engelbert, gave nothing but excuses, proving that protecting Caitlin Clark was never their priority, and that failure is exactly what led us to this devastating end. And when you trace it back, the evidence has always been there. Because during her rookie season, Caitlin Clark absorbed nearly 20% of all flagrant fouls in the entire league, most of them coming from rival teams like the Chicago Sky, and most of them delivered by Angel Reese. And these weren't basketball plays, they were hard, intentional hits, followed by laughter and taunts as Clark picked herself up off the floor. And imagine that in any other workplace where someone is repeatedly assaulted and mocked, people would be facing criminal charges. Yet in the WNBA, it was brushed off as part of the game. And this constant targeting turned into a culture where other players felt empowered to take shots at her too. Not because they could stop her skill, but because they knew referees would let it slide. And as the physical punishment piled up, the result was inevitable. Injuries that never had time to heal, a body breaking down under the pressure, and a league that stood by pretending this wasn't happening, while fans watched their brightest star being sacrificed in real time. By the time this season rolled around, the targeting didn't stop. it actually escalated, and Clark wasn't the only one taking the hits anymore, because Sophie Cunningham, another fiery competitor who plays with energy and grit, suddenly found herself drawing flagrant fouls at a rate higher than almost anyone in the league except Clark and Aaliyah Boston. And what makes this so infuriating for fans is not just the frequency of these fouls, but the blatant inconsistency in how officials handled them. Because when Clark or Cunningham were dragged down or shoved across the lane, whistles stayed silent. Yet when veterans or league favorites absorbed contact, they immediately marched to the free throw line. And that kind of double standard isn't just unfair, it's dangerous, because it tells defenders they can hold, hack, and harass certain players without consequence while punishing others for even the lightest touch. And in a league trying to grow its audience, this sends the worst possible message that its brightest young stars are expendable while its officials play favorites. And that dynamic has now created a crisis that goes far beyond a single injury. Think about what that really means. One athlete packing arenas in Dallas, Las Vegas, New York, and Chicago should have been treated like a priceless investment, the kind of player every league in the world bends over backwards to protect. But instead, while television networks signed record-breaking broadcast deals and sponsors poured millions into campaigns built around her name, Caitlin Clark couldn't even get the most basic foul calls that other stars in other leagues receive automatically, and fans didn't get to watch her thrive. They got to watch her slammed off the ball, hand-checked every step of the way, hacked across her arms without a whistle, and all of this while league officials celebrated revenue growth as if the numbers meant more than the health of the player who created them. And in the end, what should have been the golden era of the WNBA became a dangerous spectacle where the league's biggest star was targeted, injured, and ultimately sidelined because those in power valued ticket sales over her protection. And what makes it even harder to swallow is that this wasn't just frustrating to watch, it was flat out dangerous. Because constant cheap shots don't just leave a player sore after a game, they pile up, they grind down muscles, they force awkward landings, and eventually they break a body. And that's exactly what happened with Clark. The quad that tightened in May, the groin that burned through June, the bone bruise that shut her down in August, none of it was a random fluke. It was the predictable outcome of a season where she was denied space, denied whistles, and forced to play through pain simply because empty arenas weren't an option for the league. And that's where the word hypocrisy hits hardest. Because the WNBA bragged about record ticket sales, sponsorships, and television ratings while turning a blind eye to the very player responsible for those numbers, leaving her to carry the weight until her body finally gave out, and now the league is left with the fallout of its own negligence. The reality is that this wasn't just one injury or one setback. It was a chain reaction of reckless decisions stacked on top of each other, because at no point did Caitlin Clark truly play a game fully healthy this season. 3 separate times, she was listed as day-to-day with the word precautionary slapped on the report as if that magically meant she was fine. But precaution in the WNBA didn't mean rest or recovery. It meant tape it up, get quick treatment, and push her back on the floor by the weekend, and fans could see it with their own eyes. Her first step slowed, her cuts came up short, her face grimaced with pain, and still she was thrown into back-to-backs, heavy defensive matchups, and cross-country travel until the injuries piled too high to ignore. And that's why this collapse feels less like bad luck and more like systemic failure. A failure by coaches, trainers, and executives who refused to protect the league's most valuable player, even when the warning signs were flashing in neon. And the fallout has been nothing short of catastrophic, because the moment Clark's season was declared over, the market collapsed. All-star tickets that were selling for more than $200 in June were suddenly being dumped for $60 by August. Resale sites flooded with desperate sellers. Arenas that had been packed to the rafters were left with empty rows, and fans who spent months hyped for her home state showcase felt tricked by endless day-to-day updates that the league knew were never realistic. And it wasn't just the ticket buyers who lost. Television ratings fell off a cliff without her name on the marquee. Sponsors who had paid millions for the Clark effect were suddenly tied to irrelevant matchups, And networks that invested primetime slots saw their numbers plummet overnight. Because what the WNBA refused to admit is that its entire momentum was built on one player, and instead of protecting her, they squeezed every last dollar until her body broke, leaving behind not just an injured star, but a betrayed fan base that no longer trusts the league's words. So when you put it all together, this wasn't just the story of Caitlin Clark's season ending, it was the story of how an entire league failed to protect its brightest star, a league that cashed in on her name, filled arenas with her presence, and plastered her face on every marketing campaign, only to abandon her when it mattered most. And that's why fans are calling for boycotts, that's why trust is gone, because people don't just want excuses about revenue and expansion, they want accountability, they want fair officiating, they want leadership that values player safety over ticket sales, and until the WNBA proves it has the courage to protect its own stars, it risks losing everything. Clark built for them in just 2 seasons because fans will not keep showing up for a league that sacrifices its future for short-term profit. So the question now is simple. Did the WNBA just fumble the greatest opportunity in its history? Or can it learn from this disaster before it's too late? Let us know what you think down below. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what comes next.